This is Damian Macy, and I'm in the residence of Norma Prevo as an interview for our oral history project of the Friends of the Marshall Public Library. It's Thursday, May the 21st, and I'm with Norma here at her residence at 304 North 7th Street. And with that, I'll introduce you to Norma. Norma, you're on. You might tell us about where you were born and some of your family, and I think experiences in Terre Haute.
Oh my. What did I say before? I was born in Terre Haute and with a family of five sisters and one brother. Yeah. And I moved here in 1952 after marrying Jim Prevo.
Your maiden name was?
Lundstrom.
Lundstrom. Mm-hmm. And I think you were telling me about where you went to school also.
I went to St. Patrick's grade school and high school and attended ISU.
Okay.
Short time.
Did you have a particular major at ISU?
No. I was only there a few months.
But apparently it was a rather special time because you met someone else there.
Well, right. Yeah. I met Doris Jensen, besides a bunch of other. We were in the same sorority, Gamma sorority.
Was that Jensen?
Mm-hmm.
Jensen.
Yeah.
Right. Kind of a Swedish name then, right?
Yeah, well, Norwegian.
Norwegian?
Mm-hmm.
Well, apparently you and she had hit it off very close,
Yeah,
as close
right.
friends.
Mm-hmm. Her father was Carl Jensen. I'm sure a lot of people would remember them.
Yes. What occasion did you happen to meet this Jim Prevo?
Well, Doris introduced me to him. They were good friends.
Real good friends?
Mm-hmm.
But you won out, right?
Well, he asked me out, and I didn't go out for a long time because she was such a good friend of mine.
Well, from school then, you worked in Terre Haute for a while.
Oh yes, I worked at Commercial Sullivan's in the lab, and tested penicillin on rabbits, and also on mice, which I could hardly stand to do, but I did do it. We had to put these mice in a little glass tube, and the tail was sticking out, and then inject the penicillin in the tail of and I'm just terrified of mice.
Oh dear.
I am.
That didn't work too well then.
I could do that job, but if I had a mouse in this house, I would leave. I couldn't. I'm just terrified of them.
And obviously maybe you kind of liked the rabbits or the animals. Did you feel uneasy about doing that with them?
Did I what?
Did you feel uneasy about injecting the rabbits?
Well, I felt kind of bad for the rabbits, but
that would be quite a unique experience. Mm-hmm. Now, did you work there before you married Jim?
Yes. Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yeah.
Then after you
After we were
married,
married, well, I quit right before we got married because I knew I couldn't stay there. Because if you're married, you couldn't work there for some reason or other. That was back in the old days, but women weren't as they were supposed to stay home and
that's right.
cook.
So when you moved to Marshall then, and you were married, you and Jim lived on the South
6th Street.
Mm-hmm. Okay. And do you remember that neighborhood, what it was like then?
Oh yeah, it was a nice neighborhood. It was. There was a big house across the street. Was an apartment house, and Spittlers lived there. Lorraine Spittler, do you remember her?
Oh yeah. Mm-hmm.
What was her husband's name?
I know it, but I can't think of it right now what it was.
I think they got a divorce, but anyway, they were.
Was it Dean?
Dean Spiller.
That doesn't seem right.
No, that doesn't quite seem right. I think he moved to Martinsville or someplace after they got a divorce. And Margaret and Raymond Lindley.
Oh, yes.
And P.A. and Carol Davidson lived on the corner from us, their children. They were really nice neighbors. A lot of fun. It was just a nice neighborhood.
In that neighborhood today, how would you compare it to when you lived there?
Well, it's about the same, I think, except I don't know of any children around, because there were several children.
Yeah.
Leo, Lois Lettner, you know her,
Oh, yes.
and Leo, wasn't that his name?
I think so.
They lived next door and they had children. They were good friends. It was a very nice neighborhood.
I think one thing that seems so different in neighborhoods today is people don't socialize very much. You may wave as you go by, but people used to sit on the front porch and visit and things like that.
Yeah.
They just don't do that much
Yeah,
anymore.
that's about the truth, yeah.
So have you kept in touch with any of those people who were your neighbors down there?
Well, all the Davidson girls, I run into them. Sally, who's married to right down the corner here, Jeff Mallory,
Jack.
and Elaine lives right over here.
Oh, White?
Oh, what's her name? Elaine.
I want to say Elaine White, but that's...
White.
Yeah. That's
Yeah, I think that is right.
Okay.
And then just the other day I was at the eye doctor's and I didn't see him, but Chris, your other sister, Chris Davidson, you know her, don't you?
Mm-hmm.
She brought her mother into the eye doctor's too, and my son Jimmy had taken me over there for the eye, because I'm going to dilate my eyes, and how awful that is.
You need someone to drive you home then?
Oh yeah, definitely. And anyway, well, he was in the waiting room. They came through and they had a little visit, and I was glad to hear that Carol was able to get out, because she hasn't been very well, I'm afraid.
Yeah, I guess that's part of the small town. You never know who you'll run into and where.
Right.
And it's nice to sometimes compare notes and get contact again with people.
Yeah. Yeah. So, it's been a very nice. I couldn't ask for a nicer place to live, actually.
When you came to Marshall and all, were you working any place here or?
Oh, for just a brief time, I worked for Staub and Taylor.
Oh yeah.
They had a TV.
TV place.
But then I was pregnant, so I had to quit. So that was only a few weeks that I worked for them.
Was that during the time that Jim worked for the Prevo Motors?
Oh yeah, he was still there.
Okay. And then from there he went to Velsico, you said?
Well, not immediately. He worked on the highway for a while before I went to Velsico. And, but he must have been with the motor company, I don't know, 7 or 8 years, I would say, after we were married.
Because your name, Prevo, has always been associated with the Chrysler Plymouth dealership and been a long mainstay in Marshall. Kind of sorry to see it's not on that building anymore.
Yeah.
From there, I think you said that Jim started working with trimming trees.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
And he had someone helping them. It was, you mentioned he had someone with him. Was it Dean Hutchins?
Yeah.
Okay. Was that like a partnership or?
Wasn't anything in writing or anything. They just
worked together.
right. But they did okay. It made me, a lot of extra money. Not a lot, but plenty. It helped out. And besides that, he liked doing it. It was like a hobby almost.
Being outside.
Yeah.
Did you have some hobbies over the years?
Well, not really.
Maybe cooking?
No, I didn't sew. I didn't, I didn't really have any hobbies.
I thought maybe with your mother making all of those clothes for the kids you were telling about,
You'd think I would have.
that maybe you like to sew.
But no, I had 3 sisters that were excellent seamstress too, but it didn't rub off on me. My sister married Joe, remember Jim Swartz?
Oh, yes.
She,
Good friend of mine.
She could sew beautifully, and my sister Margaret, who lived here for a while too, she could too. And
What are some of your, I guess, most vivid memories when you first came to Marshall, say downtown? Is there anything that really stands out in your mind?
just the fact that everybody seemed to know everybody, for one thing. One thing, Jim and I were driving down the street, and I said, "Well, who's that girl, Jim?" And he said, "Well, that's Louise Irwin. I know her those legs anywhere." Louise loved to hear that. And then another time I said, "Well, who's that girl?" And he said, "That's Charlotte." That was her maiden name. Charlotte Coleman.
Coleman?
You know her.
Oh, yes. Charlotte DeShield. Now,
And he said, "She's one of the most popular girls in school." She was still in high school at the time.
what, I guess as far as the buildings and all downtown, unfortunately, our town is very well preserved, but are there some particular things that you remember that may have changed or not changed?
Well, wasn't there a Kroger store right there downtown?
Yes.
And a hardware store. What was the name of that?
Well, my uncle and aunt owned it. Macy's Hardware was
Well,
the one.
yeah, Macy's. Oh, yeah.
And it was the Kroger store is where the library is now.
Yeah,
Yeah.
definitely remember that. Of course, I remember Bud Croc's store. Just,
Oh, yes.
you know. Bud and Eileen, they were friends.
The thing is about grocery stores, I can remember when there were so many small grocery stores all throughout town.
Yeah.
And I guess people maybe not drive so they could walk to a store and buy the milk. And,
Well, Porwood store, that was a nice store.
I don't know, there were several just right along on Archer Avenue. And those all have been, I guess, swallowed up in the fact that we've got a supermarket and don't need them anymore. Was there particularly one of those stores that you mentioned Kroger's?
Oh, I went there, but I liked Bud and Eileen's store, Bud Croc's store, because it was close to the house and I could walk there. And I didn't really know, it took a while to learn how to buy groceries ahead of time in order to cook, you know. I mean, I wasn't experienced in being a housewife. But Bud and Eileen had kept a spotless store. That was one thing, too. It was really...
It was, I guess, that warm, cozy local feel.
Yeah.
And that's what it was. It was in a residential area. And long ago has been destroyed or taken down. The Croc's Grocery, I always remember them as having one of the first shipments of Christmas trees.
Oh, really?
And of course, we lived in Martinsville later, and coming to church at St. Mary's, I always remember I was anxious to get a Christmas tree up. And around town, they always seemed to have some of the very first Christmas trees sitting out in front. I always tried to convince my dad to buy one of those. We really needed one right now. If you had moved away from Marshall, which you apparently didn't, you've always been a resident since you got married here. You've always been a resident of Marshall?
Oh, yeah.
Okay. I didn't think you lived anywhere else, but are there some events or things in the past that you remember that you feel really influenced your life, whether it was local or nationally or internationally?
Well, I remember that fire at Velsico.
Oh, yes.
Remember that?
Mm-hmm.
And I remember theater burned. I loved that theater. That was really something.
Do you remember what the admission price was for
Oh,
Strand?
no, I don't want, do you?
Children's were 9 cents. I do remember that because I went quite often.
Did you?
The thing I remember too is the cereals, especially on, I think they were on Saturdays. There was something that always left you up in the air and left you in suspense, and of course the idea was to come back next Saturday. So you had to go back next Saturday to see
Who
how.
was it that owned that? I can't remember.
Oh my gosh. I do know, but for the life of me, I can't think right now either. I believe it was 1956 or 57 when it burned.
What caused it? Did you ever hear?
I don't believe that was ever determined. Of course, that was owned by the Knights of Pythias, their building.
Oh, it was.
And they had their lodge on, I think, the top floor. So it was probably electrical fire or something that, once it got started, it just destroyed the building in no time at all. Was there a particular movie you remember seeing there?
Oh, I can't remember offhand.
Okay, I don't either, but I know I remember seeing Hopalong Cassidy and Gene Autry and Roy Rogers awful out there.
I can't remember right offhand.
Norma, is there a event or something in your past that just really kind of changed your life, or is really a big memory?
I can't really think of anything that's. I think I just had an ordinary. A lot of worries and sick children at different times and things like that. But
that's
we
enough
survived.
to be a memory. Huh?
Yeah.
Okay. Is there a modern convenience or something that's been invented that you say, boy, I'm glad of that. I just couldn't live without it?
Lots of things. And when we were kids, we used a iron that we had to set on the stove to, it was during, I can remember during the war, you couldn't buy new appliances and things. And so we used that type of iron for a long time. And of course, my mother washed on a scrub board and tub, tub full of water. And we had one place, well, this is my childhood, being a little kid in the summertime. We went out in the backyard under the grape arbor, and she used the hose to give us a bath,
Worked, didn't
Well,
it?
it did. I mean, that's just the way things were back then, It's hard to believe that people lived like that, but
So you
we
would
all
kind of
did.
say it sounds like maybe the washing machine is something that
Oh, yeah,
you would
definitely.
want to live without today.
it'd be horrible not to have it. Yeah.
A lot of people I've talked to have said, microwave, I just couldn't live without that microwave.
Yeah.
And, I think we would really say the bottom line is electricity helps us all. If we didn't have electricity, none of these things would work.
I couldn't believe when I moved over here, though, that so many people didn't have electricity, especially in the country.
Yeah.
And I was just shocked because we had it then, for so many years. And
Well, living in the city, it would be, I remember my uncle and aunt south of Weaver. I think they had electricity brought to them in 1950.
Yeah.
And it was about the same time south of Martinsville. Because my uncle and aunt south of Martinsville had a gas refrigerator. So they had a nice modern refrigerator, and I never could for the life of me figure out how a gas flame that's hot could keep something cold. But it did.
Yeah.
If you were somewhere else, some other part of the world, and you were talking to someone, what would you describe Marshall like and why it's a good place to live here?
What would I describe Marshall as what?
How would you describe Marshall and why it's a good place to live here?
Well, it's pretty clean. for one thing. People are friendly.
Good.
There's, plenty of, almost everything we needs here anyway,
Or not far away, at least.
yeah, not far away, right. Just a nice, friendly home.
Well, I agree with that, and I think my wife and I lived away from here for 15 years, and we moved back and never regretted it a minute.
Oh,
Well, Norma, it's been a pleasure visiting with you. Is there anything else you'd like to add to our
well, I
discussion?
just say, I moved here and then Jim and Mary Jo moved here. He was discharged from the service, and so then that was nice having my sister right across the street from me. And then my other sister moved here, Margaret, after her husband died or was killed. And then then she had to move back to California with her kids. And then my youngest sister, Rita, moved here. Of course, they're all gone now. They just died. But,
Would you say maybe you were kind of the attraction that helped bring them to Marshall?
well, I think it was because I was here, and they knew it was a nice town. I don't think it was me particularly, but there wouldn't be any reason for them to come unless another member of the family was here, But
It worked, I think. Well, Norma, it's been a real pleasure visiting with you, and I appreciate you taking part in
I'm
our
sorry
oral
I
history
didn't have
project.
anything more interesting to.
Well, I know you've covered a lot of things, and probably some dates and times that someone along the way will be interested in hearing that. So with that, we want to say thank you so much for participation, and it's been a pleasure visiting with you.
Well, thank you very much too.